Welcome to Graywood Gardening. It is 1 week into July and the veggie garden is just exploding. So I thought today would be a good time to do a tour of the veggie garden. Well, right here where I am sitting, which is on the mint bed, the mint, by the way, is unsurprisingly doing phenomenally well. In fact, I think it's about time for us to harvest a bunch of the peppermint to make some peppermint extract. In front of me is the potato plants growing in pots, which are doing just phenomenally well. I actually just moved these. We had them elsewhere in the garden, but had some vines growing into them, so I had to get them out of the way, which is one big advantage of growing potatoes in pots, of the many advantages. The one main disadvantage, I would say, is that these plants, now that they're big and mature, basically have to be watered every 3 days, no matter what, or they dramatically wilt and they look dead on day 4. You can bring them back from day 4, but it's rough, right? Because they're in this pot, they only have so much room in that soil to hold moisture. And now that the plants are mature, most of that soil is filled with roots and hopefully tubers. So there's not a lot of room for moisture, so I gotta water these really regularly. The garlic, we have 2 beds of garlic. It's doing great. It looks like it is almost time to harvest it. You can see the tops are turning yellow and the bottom couple leaves are turning yellow. So I think probably 1 week from now, we will be harvesting the garlic. We have 2 beds of bell peppers. Basically, 1 bed is all red bell peppers, 1 bed is all yellow or orange bell peppers. And our bell peppers, because we had a cat eat the seedlings, got started basically 3 weeks late, but at this point they are almost caught up. They're a little bit behind where I'd expect them to be at the beginning of July, but not very. Our asparagus bed continues to do just phenomenally well. These are the mature asparagus plants, which get to be about 6 feet high. This one in front of me is a female, which is why it has the berries on it. Interestingly, the blossoms of the asparagus are super unimpressive. You can barely notice them, but the bees seem to love them. And I just noticed this morning that these plants are just crawling with ladybug larvae, which is a phenomenal beneficial predator insect that I'm very happy to have here in the veggie garden. But I cannot wait until next year when we will get our first real harvest of the little spears as they come up in the spring. But in the meantime, I'm just loving having this wall of ferny foliage at the side of the garden, and I'm loving all these ladybugs. These are our pie pumpkins. We have 4 pie pumpkins here, and the idea was to plant them at the very edge of the raised beds and to pull the vines out into this open weedy area that we don't use, that someday we hope to put up a greenhouse. So the goal is take up as little of the valuable raised bed space as possible and take advantage of this unused space. So far, it seems to be working great, and we got healthy plants and we're growing some decent sized pumpkins already. That was a good sized pie pumpkin for 1 week into July. This is the perennial herb bed, which has thyme. This is German winter thyme. We have oregano, and behind me is sage. The oregano is now in full bloom, so I had just harvested this a few weeks ago before it bloomed, although it still needs a bunch of cutting back. So everything in here needs a bunch of cutting back, but it's doing great. This is the spring lettuce bed where all the salad greens were grown. Obviously, everything here bolted quite some time ago and hasn't been edible in a little while. The reason I left all the plants here rather than pulling them up is I don't actually need to seed anything new in this bed until I think next week, when this will become fall carrots and green beans. And so until then, I figured I might as well just let these things flower and let the pollinators make use of the flowers rather than just pull it up and then grow a whole bunch of weeds that I'm going to have to pull up again before I seed. So this is the main tomato bed. I'm doing a couple things differently with it. Before I even planted the tomatoes out, I seeded a bunch of carrots in between where the tomatoes would go, and these are now about at the point that they need to get pulled out just to allow better airflow for the tomatoes. The other thing that I'm doing is I've been putting some alyssum in, as well as a second or third succession now of lettuce in. The idea of there's always this little bit of bare ground in the corners and in between the tomatoes, and I really don't want to mulch it for a couple of reasons, including pests and then the difficulty in direct seeding it in the future. And so I wanted to try using alyssum, which is a good food source for some beneficial insects. And so far I'm liking the way it's working. I might actually get a lot more aggressive with undersowing alyssum next year. The broccoli has been doing great this year. Now, most of this bed, this is two different varieties. Most of this bed is Monty and has already been harvested. We got about 4 pounds of broccoli florets out of it. The back half of it is Eastern Magic and is forming its heads now, but hasn't yet been harvested. And it's gonna need, I think, maybe another couple of weeks. One interesting thing is this year I have had basically zero cabbage moth caterpillar issues. Last spring I was picking the caterpillars off left and right all spring. I haven't even found one this year, so I'm not sure why, but I'm happy about it. On the trellis right behind the broccoli is the cucumbers. And so this is a very small cucumber that can be used for pickling, but it also tastes really great for fresh eating. The cucumbers got off to a really slow start. They were direct seeded, and I thought they were gonna grow a little bit faster and get ahead of the broccoli, but instead they took a long time to germinate. They stayed small for a long time, and the broccoli eventually was shadowing them out entirely. So I actually pulled 1 or 2 rows of broccoli out so that the cucumbers could get enough sun, and now they're vining up nicely. This bed has cherry tomatoes climbing up the trellis, about half a bed of leeks, which are doing really well for this time of year, and then the annual herbs. So this is cilantro, parsley, tarragon, and of course dill. And I have badly mistimed the dill. The goal was to have dill just a little bit beyond this, where it has just started to go to seed, at about the same time that we're getting a good quantity of cucumbers coming in. And we don't have our first cucumber yet. So I think what I need to do is pull out a bunch of this, reseed a new succession of dill, and hope that that times a little bit better with the cucumber availability. The zucchini here are going gangbusters. I think it was about 33 days from when I first put the seeds into the ground to harvesting our first zucchini, and I think we're currently at somewhere close to 20 zucchini we've harvested here 1 week into July, so that's pretty great. Equally well is the sweet corn behind me. So this is all the same sweet corn. I sowed this batch like 3 weeks earlier than this batch. So the goal is just to have a little bit of a succession. So as we finish eating from this, we'll have these ones ready rather than all of the sweet corn ready at the same time. But the sweet corn is doing phenomenally well, and we're starting to get tassels over here on the older ones. And then down at the very end of this bed is butternut squash, which we're going to try to vine again out into this area that we don't use for anything. So here, all the way at the end of the veggie garden, is the berry bed, which is in a little bit of rough shape. As you can see, it's just solid grass and weeds on this end, and I have been slowly coming through and weeding this. Unfortunately, it has gotten large enough that the only way to weed it is to get down on your hands and knees and pull it out 1 clump at a time. So the reason this got so bad is we actually planted this with 30 bare root strawberry crowns. So we planted 30 bare root strawberry crowns that we ordered from M.I. Gardener. They were really difficult to see where they were planted before they started growing, and immediately all of this grass started growing around it, and I wanted to be very careful about weeding it until I could tell where the strawberries were. Well, as it turns out, I think we had a total of 8 or 9 of those 30 strawberries actually grew. We also ordered from M.I. Gardener 5 bare root raspberry plants, and only 2 of those came up. So both of those were pretty disappointing. And at least for strawberries, it's probably going to set us back a year. Now we're going to need to wait till next year and order strawberries from someplace else. All right, well, that is the state of the veggie garden here at Graywood. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or email me at brian@graywoodgardening.com. And until next time, happy gardening.